There was a quiet understanding among early villagers and settlements. The world belonged to all, and movement through it was a shared right. But in the middle of this peaceful rhythm, long before the rise of modern nations, there came a moment that changed everything. A single decision made by a single man shifted the balance of freedom. One idea, whispered by a clever mind, or perhaps a greedy one, began shaping a system of charges and tolls that would stretch across centuries. And tonight, in this soft, descending calm, we will drift back through that history, not with the cold precision of textbooks, but with the warm glow of storytelling. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a medieval road at sunrise. Mist floats low on the earth, curling around the ankles of travelers moving quietly along the path. A merchant leads a small cart filled with pottery. A shepherd guides a handful of sheep. A mother walks with a child beside her, carrying a basket of bread wrapped in cloth. None of them expect to stop. None of them expect to pay anything to cross the next bridge or enter the next village. Because for most of medieval history, these things simply had no price. Bridges were repaired when villagers gathered during the spring thaw. Town gates were watched, but never taxed for entry. Freedom of movement was as natural as breathing. That is, until the day everything shifted. On a quiet morning in a small English settlement, not far from the trading routes of Europe, a local official nobody, extraordinary nobody, remembered by name, looked at a broken bridge and wondered how to fix it without dipping into his own funds or asking others for help. And then, in a moment of what some might call brilliance and others might call foolishness, he found what he believed was the perfect solution. Why not, he thought, charge people to cross the bridge? Just a little coin, just enough to repair it. People laughed at the idea when it was first spoken. Who would pay to walk over something that has always been free? They said, "It'll never work," others echoed. And for a while, it didn't. Travelers simply avoided the bridge, choosing shallow river crossings instead. Villagers grumbled, merchants protested, and for several weeks the official who had introduced the idea stood alone in his little wooden booth beside a bridge nobody used. But the river rose in late spring. Heavy rains turned the banks to mud. That sound changed medieval history, because after the first payment came the second, and after the second, the third. Slowly, reluctantly, grudgingly, people paid, and once payment began, the little wooden booth meant to be temporary became permanent. That small decision inspired more decisions. More booths, more officials, and slowly the world that had once been open and free began to develop tolls, taxes, and charges that shaped how people traveled, lived, and worked. But tonight, as the fire crackles softly and sleep begins to draw closer to you, we won't rush through this story. Instead, we will drift gently through its unfolding, exploring how one idea can ripple through time, We will walk through the birth of medieval tolls not with frustration or judgment, but with the calm curiosity of someone strolling down an old cobblestone path, lantern in hand. We'll visit the towns that welcomed travelers. Until one day, they didn't. We'll explore the rise of pavage fees meant to repair streets paved with stone. We'll cross bridges where pontage was collected, sometimes fairly, sometimes not, and we'll pause in medieval marketplaces where coin and politics intertwined like tangled vines. But tonight, in this first part, we begin simply with the world before it all changed. A world where freedom flowed like a river. A world where movement belonged to everyone. A world slowly drifting toward an idea that would reshape it forever. As you breathe softly now, allow the rhythm of the story to settle within you. Let the images fade gently through your mind. Misty roads, wooden bridges, early morning footsteps, and a world untouched by fees and tolls. Let the warmth of the imaginary fireplace glow around you, calming your thoughts, relaxing your body, and slowing everything down. You're safe here, in this soft space between history and dreams. And soon, we'll continue with the next chapter, the moment when tolls spread across kingdoms, and medieval life was forever altered. But for now, rest in the quiet before the change. The fire inside your imagination burns a little warmer now, as if settling deeper into its own quiet rest. Flames flicker lazily, casting long shadows over wooden beams and stone walls. The world outside grows still, the kind of stillness that only comes when night truly claims the land. In this hush, we return to the medieval past, not rushed, not urgent, simply drifting along the gentle river of history. When our story last paused, the world had been unchanged for centuries. Roads were communal, bridges were shared, and entry into towns required nothing more than a greeting or a nod. But that moment, the one where a single coin fell into a wooden bowl by a lonely bridge, marked the beginning of something larger, something that would spread slowly, like ripples expanding across a still pond. Their reasons varied: impatience, convenience, or simple resignation. Others watched with growing interest. A village farther down the river, whose bridge had also begun to sag under the weight of years, followed the same model. They built a booth, they posted a single guard, and soon they too collected their first coin, and thus began the spread of medieval pontage, the first tolls on bridges. Imagine the sound of footsteps on gravel, the distant calls of merchants, the creak of wooden carts crossing stone bridges. This world moves slowly, calmly, and you move with it. The spread of tolls across the land. Deep wagon ruts carved into muddy paths, making travel difficult during winter and nearly impossible during spring rains. Merchants, especially those carrying precious goods, demanded smoother routes. But smoother routes cost money, and money was scarce. This was when a new concept took root: pavage payments for paving or maintaining roads. It began in busy trading towns, where carts traveled constantly between markets. Officials reasoned that if merchants benefited from better roads, perhaps they could contribute a small fee to repair them. Again, grumbling followed. People always grumbled at change. But with enough persuasion, enough muddy boot spavage took hold. Little by little, settlements began charging for the upkeep of the paths connecting them. Travelers now carried small pouches of coins, not just for buying food or lodging, but for crossing certain bridges, entering certain markets, or using certain roads. And yet, in those early years, none of this felt like oppression. Not truly, not yet. The fees were small. Suddenly, tolls meant more than repairs, they meant administration. That's when the medieval world discovered an enduring truth. Once something is taxed, it rarely becomes untaxed. The wooden booths became stone huts. The single clerk became a staff. Records were kept tallied with quill and ink. Agreements were made with nobles. Portions of the money went upward to lords, to kings, to councils that had never even seen the bridge being paid for. And just like that, tolls became a permanent thread woven into the fabric of medieval life. The fire beside you crackles softly as we drift through this part of history. Perhaps you can imagine the long lines of travelers waiting at a gatehouse, the soft murmur of impatience, the jingling of small coins being counted. Not with anger, but with a sleepy sense of inevitability. For in the medieval world, things often changed slowly, and then remained that way for generations. Night in a medieval town. Let your mind wander now into a medieval town at twilight, a place where narrow streets glow golden from torches and lanterns. People wondered softly privately how things had changed so much from the days when paths were free and bridges were open to all. But this was the medieval world. It shifted not suddenly, but slowly, like the tide creeping up a shoreline while no one watches. And heal like everyone else moves forward at the pace of his own life. Others drifted into the pockets of those who controlled them. Such was the nature of the medieval world, practical, imperfect, and always shaped by those with power. And yet, the system persisted because it worked slowly and unevenly, but enough roads improved in some regions. Bridges strengthened. Market towns flourished where traders gathered in dense numbers. You look around and feel the presence of all those who came before, merchants leading wagons stacked with produce, peasants carrying baskets of vegetables, nobles riding stallions with banners snapping behind them. The air grows cooler, the light dims, and the history of it all settles gently around you, as effortless as a blanket placed over a sleeping child. Not out of malice, but out of practicality, habit, and time. And in discovering this, we find a universal truth. Change rarely arrives loudly. More often, it begins with one small moment, one booth, one official, one idea, and spreads quietly until the world is simply different. The final drift into sleep. As the medieval world fades back into the mists of history, allow yourself to drift with it.